Hi everyone, welcome back to Sara's Bites. Today I wanted to show you how I make my mini cinnamon rolls without having to make dough from scratch. So we're going to use puff pastry sheets, and this recipe calls for using both of the sheets, so you're going to end up with about 40-ish mini cinnamon rolls. So if you don't want that many, just use one puff pastry sheet and go ahead and just split the recipe in half as far as the frosting / glaze and the filling is concerned. And before we start anything, just make sure you pull these out and leave them at room temperature, and then we'll go ahead and get started on the filling. Grab a medium-sized mixing bowl, and in there add 1 cup of brown sugar. I ended up using light brown sugar, but dark is fine as well. And you're going to add in a half a cup of unsalted butter that you melted in the microwave. To that, add in also 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. If you really love cinnamon in your cinnamon rolls, you can go ahead and add 1.5 tablespoons, but I think 1 is just plenty. And then as well, add in 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Now we'll use a spoon or whisk to mix these ingredients together, and honestly, it does not take much effort. So I don't think you need a handheld mixer here, but whatever your preference is, just make sure there are no lumps in there, and then go ahead and set that filling to the side. Now for our frosting or glaze, whatever you want to call it, we're going to go ahead and add in 4 ounces of cream cheese softened at room temperature, as well as 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter also at room temperature. These being room temp will just make for a lot easier mixing, and go ahead and beat those for about a minute or so together. You want them well combined before we start adding everything else. To this we'll add in 1 cup of powdered sugar, as well as 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And what you want to do before mixing that powdered sugar is just get a spatula or spoon or something to sort of start combining that powdered sugar with the actual cream cheese and butter mixture, just so that you don't have powdered sugar flying everywhere. At this point, you'll notice the frosting is quite thick and hard to mix. So go ahead and start adding 1 tablespoon of whole milk, and you can use 2% as well, but make sure you don't add in any more. First, we're gonna start off with 1 tablespoon, mix it, see how thick it is, and then go ahead and add in another tablespoon. So I ended up using 3 whole tablespoons of milk. You may need 3 to 4. It really just depends on if you level that powdered sugar, if you sifted it. Honestly, it depends on a lot of different factors. So I would just start off with 1 tablespoon and then just keep adding to it little by little until you get the consistency that you want. Some people like very thick glaze on top of their cinnamon rolls. I like mine to be a little bit on the thinner side and to sort of melt as you warm up leftover cinnamon rolls, or even when you take them fresh out of the oven. I love to put the glaze on there and it just starts to melt. So that consistency that you want is really preference based. Now what we'll do is grab our puff pastry sheet, and you're just gonna roll it out on a little bit of a flour surface. So you don't want to roll it out too large because it gets super thin, and puff pastry sheet is very thin to the point where it will break if you do too much to it. And then if it starts to stick like mine did here on my kitchen counter, just add a little bit more flour. You just kind of want a rectangle shape so that we can start adding everything on there. Now you'll want to prep a baking sheet with parchment paper on top of it and start preheating your oven at 350 degrees at this point, and go ahead and transfer that dough onto a cutting board just so that you don't make scratches onto your countertop. Now pour half of that filling on top of the dough, and we're gonna go ahead and spread it with a spoon, or you can even use one of those baking brushes. Just make sure you save half of that filling, because remember, that's supposed to be for the other puff pastry sheet, unless you just want to go crazy and use 1 sheet and do all that filling and frosting, but those will be super sweet cinnamon rolls. Now we'll start to roll that dough and try to keep it as tight as you can. I know this is a little bit trickier than regular cinnamon dough that you make from scratch, because that one is thicker. Puff pastry tends to be thinner, like I said earlier, so you'll just have to try your best to keep it as tight as you can. And even if they don't look uniform and the roll does not look perfect, I promise the cinnamon rolls are still going to taste great. Use a knife or whatever you prefer to cut those edges off, since those do look a little funky, and I actually still do bake mine because those are the ones that I'm just going to eat as soon as they come out of the oven. And then go ahead and start to cut your roll. So they don't have to be perfectly sized. Your dough will stick like mine did right here. Just get some tiny cinnamon rolls out of there, and then we're gonna start to place them onto the baking sheet. And what I like to do before putting them on the baking sheet is making sure that they are at least a round shape, because as you cut them and press that roll down, they will sort of end up being like long rectangular cinnamon rolls. So just kind of use your index finger and thumb finger to go ahead and press them into a circle before you put them on a baking sheet. And remember, these do not have to look perfect. We did not make dough from scratch. Puff pastry is a little bit different to work with. So don't worry if they're not uniform, if they're not all the same shape and size. Go ahead and bake them at 350 for about 14 to 15 minutes. You don't need much longer than that because this dough bakes super fast. Once they're done baking, go ahead and transfer them to a cooling rack. They don't need more than 10 to 15 minutes. So after that, you can go ahead and frost them with a spoon or spatula, whatever you prefer. And remember, these will taste a little bit different just because we did not use your traditional cinnamon roll dough, so they will be a lot more flaky. And I do recommend, if you have leftover cinnamon rolls, that you pop them in the microwave for about 10 seconds or so, just so that they are softer. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this recipe. Please let me know in the comments below if you end up trying these and what you think of them, especially puff pastry dough versus regular. I know with regular cinnamon roll dough, it does take quite a bit longer to make all that dough and work with all that. So I do hope that this is a quicker way for you guys to enjoy cinnamon rolls, and you can even make them bigger. They do not have to be mini sized ones. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you are enjoying this recipe, give me a thumbs up below and turn on that notification bell if you would like to be notified for my next recipe video. See you guys next week. Bye.